Welcome to tonight's live stream. I'm going to get started in a minute. I just need to let everybody on social media know that the stream is going on. Get started. Okay, I am now going to get started with tonight's show. And I wanted to give everybody a progress report on John Haynes at Death's Door, the comic. Antonio Balderi has finished all of the art on John Haynes at Death's Door. So all I'm waiting for right now from Antonio is the cover. And once I get that cover, I will be launching the Kickstarter for John Haynes at Death's Door. And you'll be able to put in your pledges for a paper copy or a digital copy of the John Haynes at Death's Door comic. Now, with the work practically done on the John Haynes at Death's Door comic, I am going to be focusing on the promoting the books of the 2022 SJS Direct catalog. Now, right now, ISIS Legacy is currently available in paperback Kindle format, and you can get your copy of ISIS Legacy right now in paperback and digital format. And this is a book that where the goddess next door shows us all the impact of women on a family's legacy. And it's great reading that will show you how important it is to teach a culture as related to valuing what your fathers built in your daughters. So you can pick up your copy of ISIS Legacy on Amazon.com today. In paperback and Kindle format. So you can pick up ISIS Legacy in paperback and Kindle right now. And currently I've put up Eastern Horror of the Hyena Woman for pre-order on Kindle. So this book is coming in May. I'm still working on the editing, and this is the paperback version of Eastern Horror of the Hyena Woman. Bill Walko did a fantastic job on this cover, and I can't wait to get this book to you because it was one of my Facebook friends from Africa who gave me the idea for this story. And this is a book basically inspired from one of my viewers. So Eastern Horror of the Hyena Woman is available for pre-order on Kindle, and it's becoming the paperback in May. So, with all of that SJS Direct perfunctory over, I'm going to get into tonight's topic. Now, tonight's topic is inspired by a video that I did talking about the reason why gas prices are so high. And the reason why your gas prices here in America are so high is because we have a man crisis in the White House. Now, I talk about the impact of beta males and their dysfunctional frame of thinking on society in my book, The Man Crisis. And one of the worst places you could put a beta male is in a leadership position. Now, the big problem with putting a beta male in a leadership position is the fact that a beta male does not know how to lead. And your beta male, from his birth, he only knows how to follow people because the only people he's learned how to submit to are female authority figures. And because he learns how to follow people and not lead, and only defers to female authority figures, this is what makes him completely unfit to put inside of a leadership position. And that's what America has done right now with the election of Joe Biden to the US presidency. When they elected your Joe Biden to the presidency in 2020, America thought they were going to be able to build back better after the aftermath of the COVID-19 pandemic. Unfortunately, your Joe Biden is not fit to build anything because your beta male just does not know how to build anything, because building requires life skills that most beta males don't have, and those are having a vision for where you want to go, because many beta males, they oftentimes live in a rose-colored reality, and understanding how process works. And this is a big problem when you put a beta male in a leadership position. Yes, they'll have big, grand ideas for what they want to do. Unfortunately, your beta males don't understand process. And your Joe Biden really did not understand process at all, because most of the approaches that he had for governing and running the executive branch of the United States were based on feelings. Now, this is one of the big problems when you put a beta male inside of a leadership position. They oftentimes govern and manage on feelings, not thinking about the long term as related to the logic of their decisions. And many of your beta males, like your Joe Biden, when they are put in leadership positions, they are so busy in their feelings about the other person who they see as an adversary, they cannot see anything from a panoramic perspective. And because they can't see anything from a panoramic perspective, sadly, many of these males really do not understand the process as related to critical thinking. Now, a president has to have good critical thinking skills, because with critical thinking skills, a president has to understand what his decisions will impact in the long term, and they have to understand the consequences of their actions on the country in the long term. Unfortunately, your Joe Biden did not understand the consequences of his actions in the long term. And after he won the presidency in 2020 and got inaugurated in 2021, what he wanted to do was get back at Donald Trump and govern on spite. And one of the decisions that he made that impacted Americans was canceling the Keystone Pipeline. Now, this cancellation of the Keystone Pipeline, it seemed on the surface like it was a way to get back at Donald Trump for creating an energy policy that made America so-called independent. But what this policy did in the long term was it damaged America's ability to be able to fuel the vehicles that drive America's economy. Because once your Joe Biden ended the Keystone Pipeline, what that did was it wound up changing up the price of oil, because the speculative oil futures market now saw that there was not going to be any sort of American oil pipeline bringing oil to America. And this compounded with the increase in demand post as related to the declining pandemic and Americans returning to work raised the price of oil all across the country. So your Joe Biden, because he was in his feelings like a beta male, he wound up canceling the Keystone pipeline. And this cancellation of the Keystone pipeline, what this did is it wound up driving up the price of oil, which also drove up the price of gasoline. So this is what happens when you put a beta male in a leadership position and they govern on feelings. They don't understand the concept of cause and effect. And when you don't understand the concept of cause and effect as a leader, you wind up making decisions that do harm to the people in your country. And this was one of the biggest mistakes, again, as related to your Joe Biden, that has had an impact on the US economy because he didn't really understand that this wasn't about getting back at Donald Trump. No, you have to govern the entire country and you have to make decisions that benefit all of the people, not just those who you have in your feelings about. Now, your Joe Biden further went out here and committed more dysfunctional policies in an effort to govern to spite Donald Trump. And one of the things he wanted to do was try to show up Donald Trump by saying he was going to have American soldiers leave Afghanistan. Now, your Donald Trump had set up a structured plan for Americans to leave Afghanistan, and he had a structured strategy for an exit from the country. But your Joe Biden, because he wanted to show that he could do things better than Donald Trump, he accelerated the exit of U.S. troops from Afghanistan. And when he did this, he let the Taliban know that there was not going to be any sort of Americans in the country to occupy the country. So by him announcing that he was leaving the country, what he did was he went out here and gave the enemy information, because once you announce that you're leaving, the people who wanted to gain power, they know that there's a void and they're looking to fill the void. So Joe Biden made a major mistake when he announced that he was going to leave Afghanistan, and he did not have a strategic plan for leaving the country. And again, he did this out of spite, despite Donald Trump, but he didn't understand how it was not only going to hurt Afghans, but it was going to hurt the international community. Because when he did this exit in such a rapid fashion, it gave nobody time to go out here and understand the context of what the impact of these actions would have on the international community. Because when you are exiting a country, you need to have a way to transition power from the established government to the forces in that country. And your Joe Biden did not go out here and do this. He did not take a slow exit process, because any critical thinker would have said, no, we're not going to exit in a couple of months. We're going to exit over the course of 3 to 4 years. So any smart president would have said, look, I'm going to exit the country slowly, and I'm going to exit in a way where we do this in an organized fashion. But your Joe Biden didn't do this in an organized fashion. He wound up sending the troops out first, and that left a lot of diplomats and other assorted employees stranded in a country where there was a lot of chaos. And that, again, showed how your Joe Biden was a complete failure, because this is what beta males do. When a beta male gets put in a leadership position, because they don't have critical thinking skills or the ability to use logic and reason, they don't have organizational skills. And because they don't have organizational skills, they don't know how to do things in a structured manner. Now, a man understands how to do things in a structured manner, and they take their time to accomplish their goals. So they will try to work towards meeting certain benchmarks as related to whatever they're doing. But because a beta male focuses on his feelings, he tries to rush and overlook certain steps. And because he overlooks certain steps, what happens is that you get chaos instead of structure. And that's what we had in Afghanistan. We had nothing but chaos, because if you had a good critical thinking leader, the first thing they're going to do is they're going to make the people who are non-essential workers leave, like your employees on contracts, and your civilians, they're going to be the first to leave the country. And that's going to be supervised by your military of soldiers. And as it's being supervised by your military soldiers, then you ensure that all of those people are secured. And then as the military is secure, after they secure all of the civilians leaving the country, what you're going to do then is secure that the equipment that you have there will be removed from the premises of that country. That's what you do in a structured move. First, you move the civilians, then you move the equipment that you consider to be vital to yourself and a danger to the society. And then what you do is, after you've moved the civilians and you've moved the equipment, like those planes and those Humvees and all of those vehicles and all of those helicopters, once you move all of that equipment, then you go out here and you then remove your military personnel. And you do this because you want to go out here and ensure that those people will be safe. And you also want to ensure that your equipment is secured so that your enemies, like the Taliban, won't get access to those weapons. And then after that, you then remove your military personnel, because the military personnel will be able to defend themselves from any sort of danger. Unfortunately, because your Joe Biden was in his feelings about trying to one-up Donald Trump, he then went out here and sent out everything in a mismanaged fashion, and this led to the complete collapse of Afghanistan, all due to his disorganized and inept leadership, which is a classic trait of a beta male, because a beta male does not lead in situations. A beta male lets the situation lead him. And your Joe Biden has been letting the situation lead him ever since day one. And when you let the situation lead you, you wind up in a situation where you are not controlling things, you are not in charge, and everything running in a chaotic and disorganized manner. Now, your Afghanistan was where many Americans started to realize that there was a major problem with the Biden presidency. And that's when many Americans who were thinking highly of Joe Biden started to lose respect for your Joe Biden, because they started to see that your Joe Biden really was not taking leadership over a situation in a critical manner, and he practically put the country of Afghanistan right back in the place it was before 9/11. Because of his inept leadership, Afghanistan practically fell back into the state that it was before 9/11, and that was all due to him trying to one-up Donald Trump, the same way a beta male tries to one-up a guy who he's competing for the affection of a female. Now, when you have beta males out here and there's a female that they like, what they will do is try to make derogatory statements against the guy that she's already involved with. Because one of the mistakes beta males make is getting involved with women who are already in relationships, and they want to try to sell themselves as the better choice. And that's what your Joe Biden did here. He was trying to sell himself as the better choice, but he was showing us all how he was completely incapable of being a good choice, because he was not an effective leader from minute one. And again, he was letting the presidency run him, and he was not running the presidency. Now, your Joe Biden, in addition to practically making Afghanistan a complete debacle and going out here and cutting the Keystone pipeline, he practically failed as related to controlling the pandemic. Now, your Joe Biden made a big mistake when he was in the debates with Donald Trump, and the biggest mistake he made was making the goal of 70% jabbed as related to the COVID-19 vaccine. Now, this goal, any advisor would tell you, or a critical thinking man would tell you, is completely unrealistic. But once your Joe Biden made this whole um, goal, it was something that practically set him up for failure. And this is another problem that your beta males have, is that they set completely unrealistic goals, and then when everything winds up falling completely apart, they don't really know what to do. But the mistake was in the beginning when your Joe Biden set the goal of 70% vaccinated in America, and then what happened was the numbers fell short. And the numbers were going to fall short because it takes time for people to build trust. And sadly, your Joe Biden didn't want to take the time to give Americans the time to make their own decision. And because he didn't want he didn't give people the time to make their own decision, he wanted to go out here and try to push things along. Now, when the Delta wave of COVID came along, your Joe Biden started getting scared. And that's when he let the COVID situation run him instead of letting things just flow. Now, your red state governors, like your Ron DeSantis, your Greg Abbott, and your Kristi Noem, they understood that there wasn't much they could do. But your Joe Biden, like a beta male, got scared because he feared that his words would be used against him as related to the jab. And what happened was, he feared that people would use this as more ammunition against him as related to his failures. Now, your Joe Biden on this COVID situation, then after seeing your Bill de Blasio start pushing these jab mandates as related to the increasing Delta wave, he showed a complete collapse as related to his leadership. Now, the second biggest mistake your Joe Biden made after canceling the Keystone pipeline and messing up Afghanistan was following Bill de Blasio. Now, Bill de Blasio here in New York was considered one of the worst mayors in New York City, and his approval rating was at an all-time low. In fact, Osama bin Laden is more popular than your Bill de Blasio, but your Joe Biden on September 9th decided to follow the lead of Bill de Blasio, and once he decided to make a national jab mandate for the entire country, practically led to the complete collapse of his presidency. Because in that whole action right there, your Joe Biden, what he did when he made that jab mandate was he wound up showing us that he wasn't a leader, and he was so out of control in the situation that he was following Bill de Blasio, a New York mayor. And when he did that, he came from a position of weakness. A man does not go out here and come from a position of weakness. No, a man comes from a position of strength. And your Joe Biden, when he went out here and insisted on implementing these jab mandates for private businesses following Bill de Blasio, he came from the ultimate position of weakness. And the entire world saw him coming from that position of weakness. And that's when he really started to show the vulnerabilities as related to his presidency. That's when people really started to challenge him as related to his leadership. That's when they tried to challenge his authority. And that's when a lot of his agenda started to crumble, because people like your Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema saw the weakness in Joe Biden. And once they saw the weakness in Joe Biden's platform, that's when people in his own party began to take advantage of him. And this is what happens to a lot of beta males out here, because a lot of beta males, they go out here looking to gain power as related to social situations, not thinking about the long-term ramifications of their decisions and how they look optically. Now, your beta male doesn't want to look at his position optically because he doesn't have that type of critical thinking skills. Now, a critical thinking man understands that he needs to not make certain decisions, because if he makes a certain decision, it's going to make him appear to be weak. For example, like your New York Mayor Eric Adams here, he had a opportunity to end the jab mandates here as related to your private sector, but instead he weaseled out by making it about entertainers and athletes, and that was a position that showed that he came from a position of weakness, and long term, people are not going to see him as somebody they're going to respect. And that's what a critical thinker understands. They understand if they make a decision, they have to come from a position of strength, and they have to set a direction for where they want to go when they make that decision. And they also have to understand the consequences of that decision long term. Unfortunately, your Eric Adams, your Bill de Blasio, and your Joe Biden didn't really think about the long-term ramifications as related to their decisions on these jabs and trying to get people in these jabs to take these jabs. And what they didn't understand was that what they were doing would try to force things is not going to work. And this is something I talk about in my book, Stop Simping, Why Men Don't Need Finance to Get Romance, and Stop Simping in the Workplace. Your beta male, what they will do is they will try to force things to work. Unfortunately, when you force things to work, what happens is you wind up either breaking something or you wind up breaking. And this is a problem that beta male leaders who don't understand about leadership is if something isn't working, you have to take a critical look at the way you're approaching things, not try to go out here and blame and attack people. And that's where your Joe Biden wound up making the biggest mistake that a lot of beta males make, especially when they're involved with women, and that is blaming the other person for things not going right. Because that's when his CDC director decided to come out here and say it was a pandemic of the unvaccinated. And when she did that, she divided the country. Now, a critical thinking president, he's going to fire his CDC director because he doesn't want to divide the country. But your Joe Biden allowed her to get away with making that statement because most of your beta males, they look to submit to women instead of checking women and letting them know that they're out of line. But because your Joe Biden went out here and let his CDC director get that pass, what happened is this led to the country winding up becoming divided, and this wound up destroying Joe Biden's platform as related to the pandemic and his own political platform saying he wanted to bring Americans together. Now, he said he wanted to bring Americans together, but his policy drove a wedge into the country, and this wedge further divided Americans who were already straining as related to being locked up for almost a year, being out of work for almost a year, and this was a breaking strain. And again, this was all due to a beta male being put in a leadership position because the beta male, again, they do not understand that when you make decisions, they have consequences, and that's why you have to think twice before making a decision first. Unfortunately, when you have a beta male in a position of leadership, they act on their feelings impulsively, and they don't think about the consequences of their actions. And because your Joe Biden didn't think about the consequences of his actions, the whole pandemic situation got further out of control, eventually to the point where it practically corrected itself with the Omicron wave, and it practically proved that many of these jabs and therapeutics just were not effective at all. And again, that's because of the ineffective leadership of Joe Biden, who continued to insist on mandating this jab in order to participate in American life, something that ran counter to our United States Constitution, and eventually by early 2022 was struck down by the US Supreme Court as overreach and practically showed that your Joe Biden had practically failed as related to the pandemic, because when a branch of government has to come in and correct you as related to your policy, it shows that the person who's running the executive branch is not a good leader. And it's clear that your Joe Biden really is not a good leader again, because he's letting the country run itself and he's not running the country. Now, when you let something run passively, that allows other people to get power. And when they get power, they're not looking out for the interests of the people. That allows those opportunists to gain opportunities for themselves. And that's what's happening here in the Biden presidency. Nobody is running the country. No, the country is running itself. And when a country runs itself, it's in a place where it doesn't have direction, it doesn't have focus, and it's completely lost. Now, your Joe Biden's mistake with the jab mandate practically destroyed him on that whole trying to say that he was going to do a better job on the pandemic than Donald Trump. And the whole thing is, we see that he hasn't done a good job on this pandemic because he's letting the pandemic run itself. Now, your Joe Biden, in addition to messing up with the pandemic, also wound up stalling on his Build Back Better agenda. Now, your Joe Biden also talked about how, as he controlled the pandemic, he was going to build the country back better. Unfortunately, his entire agenda wound up stalling because he let others run the country. And when he let others run the country and showed that he was coming from a position of weakness, what that gave people an opportunity to do was shut him down. Now, your Joe Biden, sadly, he doesn't understand that at his advanced age, the political game has changed, and he's still trying to play 1980s and 1990s politics in a 2020 world. And that's why Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema were able to gain an advantage over him, because they saw him still trying to play 1980s games and 1980s politics, and this wound up leading to him getting his Build Back Better program ignominiously shut down. And it got shut down not because of Republicans, but because of his own people in his Senate and his overestimation of his majority. Now, any critical thinker would say, look, I may have a majority, but I don't have a big majority, so I really need to scale back all the crazy as related to any sort of agenda. But your Joe Biden allowed people to put all sorts of ridiculous things into his agenda, like your family leave, where a company would have to pay for a person's salary while they were out of work and pay for another person's salary while they were working there. That is a completely, absolutely insane policy. And many of the policies that were in Build Back Better, like your gender studies and other crazy ideas, these ideas were the main reason why many Americans didn't support Build Back Better, especially when they got a look at the price tag and realized that this price tag was just absolutely absurd for all of these goodies and giveaways that weren't going to benefit the American people long term. So this is why Build Back Better completely collapsed. And your Joe Biden, he's sitting there wondering why everything failed, but everything failed due to his inability to lead, his inability to set direction, and his inability to set tone. Because whenever you put a beta male in a leadership position, they don't know how to set a tone, they don't know how to set a direction, and they sit back passively. And when you sit back passively again, you are coming from a position of weakness. And when you come from a position of weakness, people do not go out here and respect you. And when they don't respect you, they don't support you. Yes, people will tell you what you want to hear, but the whole thing is that they look at you and they don't see anybody they can stand behind, because they don't see you standing up for yourself, so they don't see a reason to stand with you. This is a big problem that many beta males don't understand, is that when you don't stand up for yourself, you make it where people have no incentive to stand with you, because if you can't stand on your own 2 feet and present yourself in a way that shows that you believe in what you're doing, you can't expect others to come in here and support you if you don't make any sort of effort to show that you're serious about what you're doing. Now, another problem with your Joe Biden as related to his presidency early on was the border. Now, this was a thing that he said your Donald Trump was so racist on as related to building a wall. He made the statement, oh, that was so racist. But the big problem is that he didn't set any sort of boundaries. Now, whenever you're a leader, you have to set boundaries with you. And there's a brilliant video that Akwesi 100, also known as the brother of Logic and Common Sense, made last weekend, where he talked about territory. And you have to set a boundary for your territory. And if you don't set a boundary for your territory, what you're doing is sending a message that people don't have to respect you. And your Joe Biden made one of the biggest mistakes of his presidency that many beta males make, and that is he didn't set boundaries with the U.S. border. Now, he didn't set any boundaries with the U.S. border because he was in his feelings about Donald Trump, and he wanted to show how much of not a bigot he was. But what he did was he opened the door to a lot of different migrants coming into the country during the dark days of a pandemic. And these migrants were allowed to come into the country unvaccinated. And this really ran counter to his jab mandates later on. But the whole thing is it sent a message to the international community that they do not need to respect America because America does not respect itself enough to set boundaries. Now, I'm no supporter of Donald Trump, and I do not like Donald Trump, but I will respect what he did as related to the border, because like Akwesi 100 said in his classic video on his channel, you have to go out here and set lines for your territory, and you have to set rules for your territory. So you have to go out here and establish boundaries for your territory, because if you do not set boundaries for your personal space, what that does is send a message to people that you are weak. And when you send a message to people indirectly that you are weak, what they're going to see is somebody they don't respect. And the whole thing is, when you set those boundaries with your actions, you let people know, hey, this is as far as you're going to go in my space. And guess what? When you set that line, people are going to respect your space. But your Joe Biden and many of those beta leftists, they don't really understand the concept of boundaries, and they don't understand that you have to set a line, because if people can take an inch in your space, they are eventually going to feel like they have a right to take over your space. Now, as a kid who's been bullied, I know about boundaries, and you have to set them very early, because if you don't set the boundary early on as related to how people treat you, you are opening the door for people to disrespect you. And that's what your Joe Biden did to the United States as a country. He set the boundary where other countries do not need to respect the United States. Again, short term, he was trying to be open to people, and this is something beta males try to do. Oh, I'm going to be open to be liked. But when you open yourself up too much and give away too much, people don't respect you. And the world international community no longer respects America because Joe Biden did not set boundaries. And this, had long-term ramifications on the United States this year as related to our issues as related to trying to get oil. So this is another problem with your beta males. Again, they cannot connect dots. Now, the late David Carroll, he talked about connecting dots because it's an important thing that a man has to do, and a man has to go out here and connect dots in order to see how one of his actions leads to an equal and opposite reaction from another individual, and how his actions impact other actions as related to a bigger picture. But your beta males, again, because they feel and they do not think, what they do is they act, not thinking about how one action connects to another action, and they don't understand the impact of one decision on another decision. This is the big mistake that your Joe Biden made, and because he made that mistake as related to the border, and he made that mistake as related to oil, this is where he wound up in a hole early as 2021, because once he showed that nobody needed to respect America's borders, and then he cut the Keystone pipeline, He then went first begging OPEC for oil, but OPEC had no reason to respect Joe Biden at this point because he did not go out here and set boundaries to show that America respected itself. So you're asking people to go out here and give you oil, but the whole thing is you had your own oil and you cut off your own oil, and then you didn't set any sort of boundary for how you would be treated in the international community. And this is what led to people not wanting to, at OPEC to give you oil, not understanding how one action connected led to the indirect connection to another action. But any critical thinking man understands how one action impacts another action, and one decision can lead to a reactive decision from other people. Because again, when people see that you're not looking out for your own territory, they see you as weak. And when you start to ask them for help, they have leverage in the situation now. And when they have leverage in the situation, they look at you not respecting yourself. And when they see you not respecting yourself, they don't have a reason to respect you. And again, this is where your Joe Biden fails as related, again, to his oil policy. And this oil policy was one of the reasons why we had inflation here in America. The reason why we have inflation here in America is two reasons. One, because of Joe Biden's decision to cut the Keystone pipeline and shorten the supply of gas, which led to prices going up. The other is because your leftists went out here and poured billions of dollars into the country during the pandemic. Now, this was a decision that was done out of spite to Donald Trump aggressively, while passively, again, trying to say, oh, we're trying to take care of Americans during the pandemic. But the whole reason for the lockdowns basically was to spite Donald Trump and pour money into the U.S. economy. And as they poured this money into the U.S. economy, trillions of dollars, what this did was it caused inflation. Now, this inflation, what it did was it lowered the value of the dollar, but your leftists didn't understand how every action, again, has a connection to a future action. They were so busy trying to get even with Donald Trump by pouring money into the U.S. economy and locking Americans out of their jobs in an effort to hurt Americans, that they didn't see how it was going to impact America's economy long term. Now, this decision to pour all of that money into the economy through the extended unemployment, the 3 or 4 stimuluses, this lowered the value of the American dollar, and this led to an inflation of prices, all because your leftists were angry about the 2016 election, and they were still looking to get even with Donald Trump, even as Americans were dying all across the country from this pandemic. They were still looking to get their revenge on Donald Trump. And again, this hurt the country long term. And this is one of the other reasons why we have so much inflation, because we have so many dollars flowing through the country, and those dollars are lowering the value of the dollar. Unfortunately, many people don't really see how your Joe Biden, again, a beta male, wasn't really thinking about the big picture, and he was getting ready to pour even more money into the country to build back better. But thankfully, your Joe Manchin and Christian Sinema saw how inflation actually impacts people and prevented him from further pouring even more money into the economy, practically imploding the value of the dollar. Now, your Joe Biden, again, he's a beta male, and he's following the lead of people. And as he follows the lead of people, he's taking America into a decline. Now, as he's taken America into a decline, he has gone out here and seen his approval ratings drop. And as his approval ratings have practically dropped into the low 40s and even the low 30s, he realizes that he's a president in crisis. Now, this president in crisis realizes he's practically dug himself and his party into a hole, and now he's looking for a way to get out of that hole. Unfortunately, there's no way for him to get out of that hole by taking any sort of responsibility without incriminating himself. So he does a classic beta male tactic, which is to deflect. And the way he deflected was by trying to make us focus on the Ukraine. Now, your Joe Biden needs us to focus on the Ukraine in order to not see any of his failures as the president for the last 1.25 years. Because he's failed so miserably at running the country, he wants to run away from his problems and have us focus on a foreign country. And that's why he instigated the whole Ukraine situation and created all of this propaganda about the Ukraine. It's not about the Ukrainians, it's about a failed American president. And as this failed American president looked to deflect, what he wanted to do was make Vladimir Putin the enemy when the real enemy was Joe Biden, because Joe Biden is his own worst enemy. And your Joe Biden is his own worst enemy because he does not know how to lead. Because when you put a beta male in a leadership position, it's his low self-esteem, low self-worth, and his inability to see value in self that prevent him from being able to motivate others to support him because he's not motivated to believe in himself. And because he's not motivated to believe in himself, he doesn't have a vision for where he wants to go. And this is why your beta male winds up going around in circles. And when your beta male goes around in circles, what he does is send a message that he cannot set a direction for himself. Because where your Joe Biden is taking the country is in a vicious cycle. A vicious cycle I have seen many beta males participate in when they take a hold of a leadership position, because every time I see a beta male take a leadership position, they practically send everything that they run in a downward spiral because they let the situation run them. I've watched many episodes of your Gordon Ramsay's Kitchen Nightmares and your Hotel Hell, and I've even worked with these types of managers, and I know what type of nightmare situations these guys create. And the nightmare situations they create is they winding up taking everything into a decline because they go out here and they abdicate their leadership. They delegate their tasks to some female, and when that female winds up overwhelmed, they wind up making everything fall completely apart, and then they never take any sort of responsibility because for them, it's always somebody else's fault. And when you look at the Biden presidency, he doesn't want to take responsibility, so he wants to make Russia the bad guy, similar to the way people were making Donald Trump presidency, always talking about Russia. It's always somebody else, but never themselves. And that's one of the worst parts of beta male leadership is that everything is always somebody else's fault. And because it's always somebody else's fault, they never want to take responsibility for any of their failures. No, it's either the media or it's somebody else out here. They never want to say, I messed up. And the reason why they don't want to say, I messed up is because that means they have to acknowledge their mistakes. And beta males, they always think that they're perfect. And one of the things that makes them believe that they're perfect is mommy always told them that they never did anything wrong. And the whole thing is they don't really like to deal with conflict. And that's another big problem with beta males. They want to live in the smooth world. Now, your Joe Biden wants to live in the smooth world where the Russians are responsible for the inflation. And he was trying to gaslight people and try to sell them this lie. Unfortunately, the facts are too strong for that lie to gain any sort of traction. Now, this was the narrative that your Joe Biden wanted to push because, like most beta males, they like to tell this lie to themselves. Oh, it was not my fault. It was not me. It was not me. Is anybody else having audio issues? Okay, does anybody have audio issues? Does anybody have audio issues? I have audio issues on my side. But they love to make it somebody else's fault. But the whole thing is, when you are a man and you are in a leadership position, you have to be ready to take responsibility, because at the end of the day, every decision is yours and you are the one in charge. Now, a God-centered steward understands that he is responsible for his decisions and he has to report to God for his decisions. Unfortunately, where Joe Biden doesn't seem to connect the dots as related to his decisions, and because he cannot connect the dots as related to his decisions, he can't see how all of the failures connect to him. Now, your beta males, again, they don't understand cause and effect. They can't connect dots and see how one decision affects another, but any critical thinker can connect the dots and see where your Joe Biden failed as related to the Keystone Pipeline, and how that failure of the Keystone Pipeline, making that decision on an emotion, practically led to the energy crisis we're having right here in America. Because he decided to end the Keystone Pipeline, this led to oil futures and oil speculators driving up the price of oil, and this is what led to the inflation of the gas prices. And that inflation of gas prices led to the increase in prices all across the country. Again, one decision had a domino effect on others, just like his decision on this Ukraine also is having further consequences and ramifications. Now, I recently read reports that there were going to be food shortages because America gets a lot of its wheat from the Ukraine. Another bad Biden decision because he wanted to deflect from his failures, and because he wanted to deflect from his failures, he made a situation in the world even worse, because he went out here and made a decision to try to push this whole Ukrainian conflict, and this made things even worse than before. And again, this is what happens when you put beta males in leadership positions. They don't, again, think about the consequences of their actions. They don't think critically about how one decision affects another. And because they don't think about how one of their decisions affects another, this not only puts a nation in crisis like the United States, it also puts the world in crisis. Now, your Joe Biden, again, with his decisions, put the nation's food supply in crisis. He's put the nation's gas supply in crisis. And as he's done this, he has shown that he's coming further from a position of weakness, because he decided to go out and then consult with America's enemies, like the Venezuelans, and he went out here talking to other allies he alienated, like the Saudis. Unfortunately, those allies see him as weak, and those enemies see him as weak, and that's why they've been blowing off his calls, because they see how weak he is, and him coming to them and begging for help. This is not something a man does. No, if a man winds up in a situation where he goes out, he doesn't go out here and start alienating people. If he has a disagreement with people, he works it out in private. He doesn't participate in emotional decisions by making enemies. No, a smart man understands that if you go out here and make an enemy, you may need that guy later on, and that guy will not be favorable to you. But when you're a beta male, you go out here and you make a lot of enemies, and then you wind up crawling back to those enemies looking for help. But those people, because they don't respect you anymore, that's what leads to them blowing you off. But this flies over the head of your Joe Biden and whoever is running him. They don't understand how the man code works, unwritten social rules of man work. When you go out here, you disrespect the man, and then you come back to him, he has no reason to even hear you, and he has no reason to even want to acknowledge your presence. So that's why the UAE, the Saudis, and the Venezuelans have blown off your Joe Biden. They don't respect him as a man. They don't respect his leadership. and they see weakness in front of them. And this is something that happens to many beta males. They don't understand that once you go out here and once you wind up pushing a man away and disrespecting a man, that man is going to leave you to your fate. This is what happens to many females out here when they disrespect a man. Once they go out here and disrespect that man, what that man does is that man then charges her to the game, cuts off all connections, and then if that female comes back to him saying, "Oh, I'm sorry," or "What's going on? How are you doing?" That's when that man says, "I'm not having anything to do with you. You've been charged to the game, and I'm not getting in any more contact with you." And that's what's happened with the UAE and the Saudis and the Venezuelans. They see that this Joe Biden, again, like most beta males, got in his feelings, got full of himself, got disrespectful, started talking a lot of crap. And once he talked a lot of crap, they knew how to deal with him later on by saying, "Look, we're not going to deal with you no more. And whatever happens to you, happens to you." And this is how it rolls when it comes to men. But your beta males, they don't really understand how things work because they primarily get all of their socialization skills from a female. And your female, she thinks that she can go out here and say what she wants to say and not have to deal with any consequences. And then when she has to deal with those consequences, then she's looking like a fool at the end because that's when she doesn't understand the whole concept of words having meaning. And when words have meaning, that means when you say something, you're going to have to deal with the consequences of your actions. Now, your Joe Biden is dealing with the consequences of his actions, and the consequences of his actions show us all that he's a president in crisis, and his presidency is in crisis because he's not leading the country. He's following behind people. And when you follow, you send a message to people that you are not somebody anyone needs to respect. When you are a follower, you send a message to people that you are not in charge. You send a message to people you are not anybody that they need to regard. And you send a message indirectly to people that there is no direction. And this is why your Saudis, this is why your Russians, and this is why your Indians are now talking about trading oil on China's yuan because they see the weakness in America, and they see the weakness in America because we have a man in crisis running the presidency. And when you have a man in crisis running the presidency, a beta male, what you're doing is sending a message that you are not the superpower anymore. No, you're sending a message to the world that you are a complete pussy. And when you send the world you're a complete pussy, you're sending a message to the world that they can screw you over. Because that's what's happening here as related to your Joe Biden. He has sent an indirect message through his actions to people that the U.S. is not a superpower anymore because a superpower has a leader in charge who can set a direction, a leader in charge who can set a tone, a leader in charge who can set order. But when you have a beta male, he does not do any of these things, and he's looking to please lots of people and make people happy. But a true to the game leader is not about feelings at all. No, a true to the game leader is about setting an agenda and setting goals. And your United States is not in any place where it has set any sort of goals. And that's what I'm seeing from your Joe Biden's leadership. He's not setting any sort of goals, and he can't even accomplish his goals. I mean, his Build Back Better fell completely apart. His jab mandate was destroyed by the Supreme Court, which showed he didn't really understand law. And he cannot control his own borders, which shows he can't set boundaries. And these are all the traits of a beta male. Beta males cannot set direction for where they want to go. Beta males allow others to take over their agenda, like what happened with Joe Manchin and Christian Sinema. Beta males cannot control their boundaries, like the border, and beta males make absolutely absurd policies that can easily be overtaken, like these jab mandates. And beta males, most of all, what makes them incompetent leaders is they follow other people, like the way your Joe Biden followed Bill de Blasio. All of these ways, all of these approaches are beta male approaches, and having a beta male in a leadership position like government is a dangerous thing, because when you have a beta male in a government position, it sends a message to the international community that that nation is weak. Because when you have a beta male in a leadership position like in government, what they do is, again, through their actions, send that message. A nation is weak, and when others see that you are weak, they are going to take advantage of that weakness, and they're going to use that weakness to grab power. And that's what the Russians were doing with the Ukraine, and that's what your China is pondering what to do as related to your Taiwan, because they see the weakness of a Joe Biden, and they see that America is not in any place to defend anything, and because they see that America will not be able to stand on its ideals, they see a real opportunity to grab power and change the whole dynamics of the entire global situation. And America, again, is in a really bad place because of Joe Biden's inept leadership, because once the Saudis change from using yuans to buy oil instead of dollars, that also leads to a decline as related to the dollar, which further inflates the value of the dollar. So in some ways, when I look at Joe Biden, I compare him to the Kaiser of Germany, who started World War I, who practically put his country in a tailspin. And this is where your Joe Biden is right now. And I also see shades of your Lyndon Baines Johnson, another idealist president who had high approval ratings in the beginning after JFK was assassinated, but wound up falling completely apart because he was so caught up in his ideals over Vietnam that it led to him having approval ratings that led to him not being able to run it. And with your Joe Biden, I see the Ukraine situation mirroring Vietnam, because he keeps pouring money into the Ukraine and wants to bring Ukrainians here while Americans are suffering under his economy. And as he puts Ukrainians first and people from other countries like Mexico and Afghanistan first, what that does is it further alienates Americans who were looking for him to lead the country by putting Americans first. Americans aren't getting anything built back better. No, Americans are being put on the back burner, because a lot of times with beta males, again, they have a very short attention span, and they do what they think is going to get them social brownie points. And what your Joe Biden is doing is he's going out here looking to gain social currency with the Ukraine, and Afghans and Mexicans, or whatever refugee of the month is, and he's putting Americans further on the back burner. Now, in his arrogance, he went out here and alienated black voters as he was going out here getting these minorities of the month and bringing them over. He went out here and took the black vote for granted, and he thought, oh, I don't need these black voters. Even though the black voters came out to him in large numbers, he went out here and threw a middle finger up at the black voter, saying he couldn't do anything for them. And most black Americans felt burnt by your Joe Biden disrespecting them. And what happened was your Joe Biden wound up alienating one of the voting blocks that practically gave him the office. Now, your Joe Biden arrogantly thought Hispanics would support him, or Asians, but it's turning out after the 2021 Virginia governor's race, those minorities are a split group that vote red, and your Joe Biden is up crap creek without a paddle. And he's up crap creek without a paddle because, like a beta male who joins a higher social circle, he goes out here and disrespects the friends that were with him. And when he disrespects the friends that were with him, which were your Black Americans, he winds up going out here and thinking, oh, I'm in with this other group. I don't need these people anymore. And what happens is that those people in that higher social circle practically abandon this individual because they don't respect him out of what they can get out of him. Because basically, those other minorities, they just wanted to get their tangibles and it was a business deal. But your Black Americans, they invested because they have emotional connections to your leftists, and your leftists threw them away so that they could get with other minorities. And now, after seeing your Glenn Youngkin beat Terry McAuliffe, they're realizing that they've lost the Black vote. And that's why Joe Biden was scrambling to go out here and try to gain some traction with Black people, with that voting right, John Lewis voting rights bill. But that bill died because Black people, they see the middle finger thrown up at them. And once they saw the middle finger thrown up at them, they lost all respect for Joe Biden. This is what happens to a lot of beta males out here when they go out here and call themselves monkey branching from one social circle to another. What they do is they alienate the people in their original social circle that had their backs to try to get with the cool people. And then the cool people wind up dropping them because they already thought they were whack. And then they try to crawl back to their former friends. But those former friends see the true character of this guy because he showed his backside to them. And once he showed his backside to them, they want nothing to do with him. So that's what happened with your Joe Biden and the Black vote. Now, there are some Black females out there still in their emotions thinking, oh, that these gestures, these symbolic gestures he's making, like the first Black female Supreme Court justice, means that they have a chance. But the larger Black population sees your Joe Biden for the jerk that he is, and for all of his statements about Donald Trump being the racist and the bigot and the jerk, we see that he's a bigger jerk, and that's what happens to many of your beta males. Many people see him as the bigger jerk because he's the one who made all of these promises. He's the one who talked all of this stuff about how he was going to be a good man, but it's his actions that lead to him undermining himself. And when people see who he truly is, this is where people don't want anything to do with him. This is the classic beta male nice guy paradigm. It's going on See Truth, the Revelator. Glad to see you here. I'm talking about how the Biden presidency is a presidency that's part of the man crisis, and how your Joe Biden is a president in crisis. Now I'm connecting this to my book, The Man Crisis, which you guys can pick up on Amazon.com. And this book will show you how the beta male paradigm always leads to a lot of men practically falling apart. And what's sad is when you put a beta male in a leadership position, everything falls apart. What's going on, Rob IS? Glad to see you here. Again, talking about the Biden presidency and the man crisis. And again, your Joe Biden is a man in crisis, and he's clearly a president in crisis. And again, when you go out here and you vote for a beta males, they talk a good game. They talk about what they're going to do. But when it comes down to the rubber hitting the road, these guys really can't get anything done. And the reason why they can't get anything done is because for all of their talk, they don't know how to take constructive action. Now, a man understands that it's not what he says that defines him as a man. No, it's what he does that defines him as a man. A man knows that talk is cheap and actions speak louder than words. So whenever you have a beta male, yes, he knows how to speak eloquently like a Barack Obama, and they know how to make a lot of bluster like an Eric Adams. But when you start looking at their actions, you realize that there are no results, and that is the undoing of many of your beta males. Yes, your beta males, like your Joe Bidens, your Eric Adams, your Barack Obamas, and your Andrew Cuomos, they can talk a good game, but when you put the rubber to the road and start asking them where they are in 3 months, where they are in 6 months, where they are in a year, you start to see that the results don't match the mouth, and you see that the words don't match the actions. Because again, your beta male, he can go out here and make a lot of noise. He can go out here and talk a big game. He can talk about how much the other guy is the bad guy. But what happens to your beta male when you put him in a leadership position is at the end of the day, everything is still where it was before, and nothing has moved an inch. And within 1.5 years of the Biden presidency, America has not moved an inch. And while your Donald Trump did have a lot of bluster when he said he could make America great again, you can look at his results and start to see actual progress in actual areas. And that is one of the things that your Joe Biden has got him upset, is the fact that your Donald Trump actually can show tangible results. Even though he was a loudmouth and an alleged racist, he can show tangible results for his whole presidency. Whereas your Joe Biden, well, then again, 1.25 years has shown he has not moved a single needle as related to the country. He has shown that he has not set any sort of direction, and he's shown that he has no sense of where he wants to go, and he's shown that he doesn't know where he's going. And again, I watched many episodes of Ramsay's Kitchen Nightmares and seen the same failed leadership approach from beta males who would go out here and open up restaurants with big dreams of being this Michelin star restaurant. But because these guys could not go out here and handle the basic tasks of making basic food, their restaurants fell into a state of decline. Now, these guys had big dreams, but they didn't understand the work that was involved. And as they didn't understand the work that was involved, many of these restaurant owners, wound up getting overwhelmed, and they started abdicating power. And the people who needed the guidance from them, they found no support, like the chefs, like the line cooks. Many of those people got frustrated and angry because they saw that this man who was in charge really could not set a tone for where he wanted to go. Because he could not set a tone for where he wanted to go, his restaurant practically fell off and the food fell off, and there were no standards at all, which is another trait of beta males. Many beta males never set any sort of standards, and because they don't set standards for anything, people just go out here and do anything. Again, going back to boundaries, a man has to set boundaries early on, but a beta male doesn't understand the importance of the first few days or the first meeting he has with an individual. No, your beta male, he's so busy trying to put this flash image up that he doesn't understand it's the substance of his actions that define him. And you only get one chance to make a first impression. And when you are a beta male, you don't understand the importance of how you behave impacts the way people see you. So your beta male, yes, again, he will look cleaner than the other guy. He will try to appear nicer than the other guy. But the whole thing is that once you start looking at his behavior and the way he actually actively does things, you see all of these things that show you he is weak. You start to see how he flip-flops. You start to see, then that shows weakness. You start to see that he does not follow through, and you start to see that he can't commit to anything. Yes, again, good talker, but once you start putting the rubber on the road and you start telling him that he has to follow through on things, you start telling him he has to commit to things, that's when the fear starts to overtake the beta male, because the beta male does not want to be committed and be accountable or responsible for his actions. And because he doesn't want to be responsible for his actions, that's when he starts to abdicate his power. Hey, what's going on, GBoot2786? Glad to see you here. Here on GBoot2786's channel every Thursday. And if you want to sub to GBoot2786's channel, you can sub in the description box. So you can sub to GBoot2786's channel I don't mean to describe you, heart donor, but the whole thing is that what's going on, Benny? Glad to see you here. Benny's one of my longtime viewers and longtime subs. Um, what is a woman? A woman is described by God as the companion to a man, and a female is supposed to be somebody with breasts and a vagina. So a woman anatomically has breasts and a vagina, whereas a man has a penis. That's the definition of a woman, GB 786. But your Supreme Court justice, she doesn't understand that definition because she wants to pander to these woke leftists in an effort to gain their approval. And again, showing the failure of the Biden presidency, weakness, and showing us that they do not stand for anything. Again, beta males, they don't stand for anything, and that's why nobody respects them. So I'm asking everybody to hit me up on the Cash App so I can continue doing streams, because that's how I stay on the air. But your Biden presidency, again, comes from that position of weakness, and we can see that weakness all around. And again, this is what I talk about in the man crisis, in my book, The Man Crisis, because I see so many men in crisis, and one of the worst things you could have is a man in crisis. When you have men in crisis, they don't really know how to do anything. They don't know how to lead. They don't know how to take responsibility. They don't know how to go out here and take ownership of the situation. They don't know how to set direction for themselves. And when you have a beta male in a position of power, they can't connect the dots between power and responsibility. They want the power so that they can have the clout. They want, like I talked about last week when I talked about how beta males want to be the man, but don't know anything about being a man. A beta male wants to be the man. They want to have the position of power. They want to wear the expensive suits. They want to be in the high places. They want to be able to run the show. But the problem is they don't have the life skills of a man to understand what being a steward of God is. And because they don't have the life skills to understand what being a steward of God is, many of these males, they don't understand that when you take action, you are responsible for your actions and you are accountable to the Most High God. And that's what a steward of God understands. A steward of God understands that they are accountable at the end of the day to Jesus and God, the ruler of the earth and the creator of the universe, and they understand that they have to take ownership of their decisions because they have to answer to God for their decisions. But your beta male, he looks to gain favor and approval from the people he's following. And when he's out here looking for approval from the people he's following, he's not looking to be accountable to anyone. He's looking to gain brownie points with those below him. And when you look for brownie points with people below you, you are again coming from a position of weakness, because subordinates, you're not supposed to be looking for the approval of subordinates. You're supposed to be meeting the goals that were established for you by the Most High. That is what a man does. He understands, look, I am accountable to God for my decisions. I'm not looking for approval from subordinates. I'm not looking to gain clout with groups of people. And when you clout chase, again, you're coming from weakness, because clout chasers, they will do anything to gain the attention and approval of others, because when you go out here looking for the attention and approval of others, you are, again, coming from a position of weakness, and you are telling people that you have no power. And when you tell people you have no power, that tells them they don't need to respect you. And respect is something a president needs to have. When you are the president of the United States, the leader of the so-called free world, you need to say that you are somebody that understands the concept of respect. Unfortunately, beta males don't understand the concept of respect because the women in their life have taught them to be liked. And that's the biggest mistake with your beta male, is he's looking to be liked, and being liked isn't important for a man. No, a man understands respect comes first, because if he does not have respect with other men, they aren't going to see him as a person they want to follow. And if they don't, and if women don't see him as somebody they respect, they're not going to see him as somebody they would love. So respect is an important intangible of manhood, and many of your beta males don't understand the importance of respect. What's going on? The King, glad to see you here. I'm talking about how your Joe Biden's presidency is a part of the man crisis, and I'm talking about how your Joe Biden is a beta male and how he is a man in crisis, and how his presidency fits right in line with the pattern and profile for beta males that I talk about in my book, The Man Crisis. And you guys can get your copy of The Man Crisis on Amazon.com in paperback or Kindle format. And you can also get The Man Crisis on Smashwords, the iBook store, and Google Play. Now, this man crisis, it just shows me how deep it goes, because when you have, again, a president who doesn't understand his role as a man, doesn't understand his leadership role as a man, this can put a country in a dangerous place. Because when your president's priorities are not about getting respect, but being liked by people, it sends, again, a message to other people that you're weak. Again, when people see weakness in a man, they see somebody they can either take advantage of, somebody they can exploit, or in the worst case scenario, somebody who they can set up to take things from. And that's what happens when you have weak leaders. They get set up for invasion or attack, and that's because you don't set strong boundaries and you don't send a message that you are somebody that needs to be respected. And this is something many of your beta males don't understand, again, because they live in gynocentric environments and look for female approval. They're looking to be liked. They're looking to get somebody's feelings where they're getting smiles. But a man understands it's not about getting smiles. It's about setting order. It's about establishing structure. It's about setting a set of standards for yourself. And that's what a man understands. Unfortunately, here in America, we have a problem with lots of males out here. Yes, they are born with a penis, but they have the mindset of a female. And that's where we have the leadership problems here in America, especially in many of the blue states. In many of the blue states, we have many of these males running things. And again, a male yes, he's physically male, but he's inside raised like a female. And because he's raised like a female, he acts on feelings without thinking about consequences. And he doesn't understand how his decisions affect everything in the big picture. Because when you understand how your decisions affect things in the big picture, you approach things differently. You understand that a decision now affects the long term. And yes, that's very true, Benny G. Yeah, all the things that made George Floyd riots, January 6th, and all of them, they all connect with, again, the weakness of America. And again, as long as the leftists have been pulling the strings, America has been looking weaker every day. And again, that's because America's men just don't have any backbone or stones to stand up to the dysfunction. And again, when you have weak male leadership in charge, everything is going to fall apart. And that's what happened here in the ghettos of the South Bronx. The men were pushed out by the feminists with these court decisions. And then after the men left the community, the males took over. And when the males took over, the entire neighborhood went from a community into a ghetto. Because again, males don't understand how things work. Males don't understand how a process follows. Males cannot go out here and set a series of goals. And when you have a male in charge of things, a male looks to cater to the female. A male looks to make the females happy. And a male doesn't think about the overall group. Now, I'm reminded of something Mad Black 80 talked about on Black Opinion. He talked about the Lion King And what we're seeing is what he made in his analogy. He talked about how the Lion King, how after Mufasa died, your Scar took over, and how the Pride Lands fell completely apart. Now, the Pride Lands fell apart because Scar made deals with the enemy, the hyenas, to take down Mufasa, the leader of the Pride. And then once he took over the Pride, everything fell completely apart because while your Mufasa, while your Scar talked a good game about being the boss and running the show, he could not produce results. So if you watch The Lion King, like Mad Black 80 talked about in his video, it shows you how there are three kinds of males. It showed us the alpha male, who was Mufasa. It showed us the beta male, who was your Scar. And it also showed us the man who was going his own way, which were Timon and Pumbaa. But eventually, your Simba, because he was raised by his father, realized he needed to go back to being a man, and he needed to take a leadership role because your Scar had practically destroyed the Pride Lands by making his compromises, coming from a position of weakness, and he had turned the Pride Lands, which were a rich, robust land that fed everyone, into a wasteland that fed no one. And that's what's happening right now when you have your Joe Biden in charge. A beta male is leading, and because a beta male makes emotional decisions, he winds up making it where nobody is prospering, nobody is growing. Yes, he has the power, but he doesn't understand the impact of his decisions on everyone. It's all about his feelings and getting what he wants emotionally. And as long as he's getting what he wants emotionally, what's happening here is that nothing is growing, nothing is changing. And this is why you don't put beta males in leadership positions. On Computer Robots, it was Mad Black 80, also known as Black Up Enya. He's no longer on YouTube because they flagged his channel and terminated it, but he does have a Patreon. So if you want to check out his videos, you can head over to his Patreon and you can pay to see his videos on Patreon. Now, your Black Up Enya, he's got some of the best content on YouTube as related to talking about Black issues. And I'm really disappointed that YouTube took him off the air because he presented and dropped facts as related to a lot of topics. But people got jealous of him, and a lot of these racist trolls couldn't stand hearing the truth from a heterosexual Black man. But a lot of the facts that he dropped were brilliant. Just like the brother of logic and common sense, when he talked about territory, that's a video I urge everybody to go out and see, because if you don't understand about territory and boundaries, that's what leads to you being open to invaders. I'm hoping he comes back and talks about how you get open to invaders, because he talked about how your finest woman, again, that white men can step up to her. And that was a brilliant point because, again, coming from weakness, when you have weak men and she's out here doing this, it shows that you're not taking care of your territory. And when foreigners can come in and open up stores and businesses in your community, that's, again, showing how you have no boundaries on your territory and these people are invading you. And again, the U.S. doesn't understand, because a lot of people take their lives for granted, how appearing open is weakness, because nobody else is opening themselves up, to be weak like people are. Here in America, we've got these woke types, these leftists, these people. They don't understand about territory and boundaries. They don't really understand how important boundaries are, because if you don't understand what boundaries are and you don't understand what the concept of respect is, you're going to be played and used by lots of people who are just going to take advantage of you. And this is what happens to many of these beta males out here, because your beta males basically are your simps. Your beta males are your tricks. And again, when you put a beta male in a leadership position, it just leads to disaster, because what you're doing is you're putting a follower in a leadership position. And when you put a follower in a leadership position, you're not going anywhere, because the follower comes from a place of fear. The follower comes from a place of insecurity. The follower cannot make a decision without somebody else telling him what to do. And when you have a follower, they don't understand how to stand up on their own. So that's why you don't put beta males in leadership positions, because when you put a beta male in a leadership position, it puts an entire nation in crisis, because this man can't do anything without somebody telling him what to do. And again, that's not a leader as God created. A leader, he knows that he has to take his own ownership and make his own decisions, and he has to be able to take responsibility for those decisions that he makes. He cannot come from that position of weakness, and he cannot go out here, let people see him weak. Okay, here's a link to Black Albania's Patreon, Computer Robots for you. Here's a link to his Patreon if you want to check out his videos. And I'm hoping he has the Lion King video up here, but it was a brilliant analogy. And again, it just showed you the difference between a leader and the impact of a man in a leadership position, and how we cannot take a man in a leadership position for granted. Yes, a lot of these guys, again, they come out and say they're flashy, like Barack Obama, the first black president, who was, again, very optically nice, but leadership-wise, he was a weak man. And again, you want to be a strong man, or a strong lion like Mufasa, and like Simba eventually learned. Eventually, Simba realized that he was responsible for more than himself, and he realized that he had to take responsibility for the pride, because it was just not him. Because once he went out there and went with Timon and Pumbaa out in the wilderness, he realized that he had a responsibility to all of the other animals in the pride, and that's why he fought to take the pride back. And that's the big problem with many American males. They have to understand that if you want your country, you're going to have to fight for it. And again, the beta male is not a fighter. The beta male is a coward. The beta male, he wants the power, he wants the clout, but he doesn't want any responsibility. And again, when you put him in a leadership position, everything is going to go to shit. And it's going to go to shit because he doesn't know how to do anything at all but talk. Good evening, Nightingale Wednesday Nightmare. I'm glad to see you here. I was talking about how the Biden presidency is a part of the man crisis, and talking about how your Joe Biden is basically a beta male who fits that pattern and profile for beta males that I talk about in my book, The Man Crisis. So I wanted people to understand what happens when you put a beta male in a leadership position, how dangerous it is. And a lot of Americans don't see the danger that they're in, because like the Romans who came eons before us, many Americans take their lives for granted. And because many Americans take their lives for granted, they don't really understand the importance of picking the right person for a leadership position. Because when you understand the importance of a man in a leadership position, you can tell the difference between a man and a male. And a lot of people, they didn't understand the difference between a man and a male with your Joe Biden and your Donald Trump. And they thought because your Donald Trump was being loud and obnoxious. But the whole thing is, they didn't look at what really makes a man, and what makes a man is results. The way you can tell the difference between a male and a man is results, because a male will never finish anything. A male will talk a good game, but the whole thing is he'll always let some little thing make him give up what he wants to do, and he'll then say that it's somebody else's fault. Whereas a man is going to go out here and he's going to persevere, and a man is going to have tangible results. It may take him a little time to get there, but eventually he's going to get there. I remember myself in 2018, I said I wanted to do a comic, and I started to do an ISIS graphic novel. And while I had a setback with Indiegogo not getting funded, I then regrouped, and thankfully to one of my viewers giving me a donation, I was able to start regrouping, but I started to do a different character that was more popular, the John Haynes character with John Haynes at Death's Door. And in between, I did do the Easting No Good Deed comic to show people that I was serious about things, and that was the first comic that I did to show results. And then after that, I then did the John Haynes at Death's Door comic, and I started to show even more results. Again, men can go out here and produce tangible results. Beta males never finish anything, and they lead to everything being practically a jumbled mess when they are in charge. And again, that's what leads to these men creating a crisis, because they can never set benchmarks for themselves, and they can never hit the finish line to meet a goal. And because they can't set that finish line to meet goals, that's why everything is a complete mess. And when we look at the Biden presidency, nothing is really finished. The pandemic is a jumbled mess. The whole border is a complete mess. The economy is a complete mess. And that's what happens when you get beta males. They can never put the period at the end of things and move on. We're dealing with this right here with your New York Mayor Eric Adams and his jab mandate. He could have easily put a period at the end of things as related to the jab mandate, but because he wanted to gain favor and approval with leftists in upstate and Washington, he kept the mandate going, and now he's painted himself into a corner, and he now was talking about he's only lifting the mandate for athletes and entertainers, and that's showing how this has become a nightmare as related to lawsuits, because if you could lift it for one, you could lift it for another. And the whole thing is, he could have easily ended things and moved to something else. But beta males, again, are terrible enders. And one of the worst things you could do is put a beta male in a leadership position and tell him to finish something, because a beta male does not know how to end anything. One of the things beta males don't know how to end things is because they're insecure, because at the end of something, you have to measure something. And your beta male doesn't want anything to measure his success or his failure. And the whole thing is, he'll keep something going because he doesn't want to put a period at the end of things. And he doesn't want to put a period at the end of things because he knows that if you put the period at the end of things, you're going to be measured by a standard. Now, a regular man understands putting a period at the end of things is not a bad thing, because when you put a period at the end of things, you can assess where you went right, where you went wrong, and whether something is a success or a failure. And a man is looking forward to ending something because he can learn from his mistakes, and he can learn how to approach things differently the next time. Unfortunately, your beta male doesn't want anything to be measured, and because he doesn't want anything to end and be measured, he just keeps stringing things along for extended periods of time because he does not want to fail. Unfortunately, in this world, you're going to fail, and the whole thing is, failure is not a bad thing. Failure is where you learn from your mistakes and do better. But your beta male doesn't want to deal with failure, so what he does is he goes out here and keeps things in a jumbled state so that nobody can measure his success or his failure. And that's something that your beta male does, is he doesn't want to measure anything, and he doesn't want anything to meet any sort of standard. So whenever you put a beta male in a leadership position, he'll sit there and keep things meandering for years and even decades. And the minute you ask him, okay, where is this going? He starts to make all sorts of excuses. But a man, when he's out here, when you ask him, where is he going? Like people, when they ask me about John Haynes at Death's Door, I can say to them, all of the principal art is finished, and all I'm waiting for is a cover, and I can give them progress reports. I can give you tangible benchmarks because I'm looking to get to the finish line, but your beta male is not looking to get to any sort of finish line. A man wants to get to the finish line because he wants that measure as related to his success, and he wants to improve and do better because he understands that when you have measures, it allows us to see where you're going. And again, measures are related to standards, and a man wants standards in place so he can measure his skills as related to where he is going. But a beta male does not want any sort of measure. He wants to talk about big plans, but when you ask him, where are you? He doesn't know where he is, and he's still stuck in neutral. And that's what's happened with Joe Biden. That's what's happened with Eric Adams. They're stuck in neutral. And again, beta males get stuck in neutral and never move an inch. And that's bad for a country because that leads to the country being stagnant, and that leads to the country not being able to grow. Because in order for something to grow, you have to let go of something you already have, and you have to move out of the place you are already in. But the beta male, he doesn't want to move out of any place. No, he wants to nest in the same space, and he wants to stay in the same place. And the whole thing is, when you're nesting in the same place, you're going nowhere and you're not growing at all. Now, I don't like your Donald Trump, but while he put the country through pain, the country was growing as related to that pain because people had to let go of their feelings about things, and they had to let go and come out of their comfort zone. In order to grow something, you have to come out of your comfort zone. You have to come out of where you are, because in order to go somewhere, you have to come out of what you're doing that's not working and start taking steps to move yourself ahead. Yes, it's very painful to do, and I've been through this after I lost my job in 2008, and I'm still out here pushing, and I had to let go of a lot of things to advance my SJS Direct company. I had to let go of a lot of my toy collectibles and things in order to pay for book covers. But when people see you making serious efforts, they respect you because they see that you're coming out of your comfort zone. You're coming out of your situation. Yes, I did criticize Donald Trump. I say I don't like Donald Trump. I don't believe he's qualified to be president, Anthony. But the whole thing is, I can respect his decisions because he stood by his decisions. And again, while he was a man out here doing his thing, he's not like this man in crisis right now who is just completely dysfunctional and off the rails. So I know that you're Donald Trump. Yes, I criticized your Donald Trump, but the whole thing is, I believe that he again wasn't qualified to be president due to his lack of experience. And I'm not saying that he was the best president, but at least he understood manhood at all. This guy, he's just trying to be a people pleaser. And again, you're coming from a position of weakness, and you're coming from that position as soft. So what's worse, the guy who tells you what the truth and you don't like it, or the guy who just tells you what you want to hear and makes symbolic gestures? Because when you have a beta male in place, yes, he tells you what he wants you to hear. He tells you I'm a good guy, and then he does a lot of bad things, and then damages an entire civilization. And that's what we have here as related to your Joe Biden. I mean, what we have here is a textbook beta male, and this textbook beta male has put America into a crisis, and that crisis is practically going to lead to America being in a place where it may possibly collapse. Because again, whenever you put a beta male in a leadership position, he tells you, okay, I know you have to pay higher prices for gas. I know you have to pay higher prices for food. I know there's a shortage, but he doesn't want to take responsibility for anything. He just tells you to keep accepting his failures instead of saying, look, this guy's incompetent. This guy doesn't know what he's doing. Because whenever you get rid of the beta male, guess what? Everything changes up and becomes better. Because that's what happened on many episodes of Ramsay's Kitchen Nightmares. That's what happened on many episodes of Gordon Ramsay's Hotel Hell. Whenever he got rid of the incompetent beta male, things got better for the country. And that's what's happening here in America. People have to realize that you have to get rid of the beta male in order to make America better. And you cannot have a civilization run by beta males, because anything run by beta males is going to be chaos. So when I look at, again, Joe Biden, I see a man in crisis, I see a presidency in crisis, and I see a nation that doesn't understand how bad things are going to get, because beta male leadership is nothing but chaos, and beta males bring nothing but havoc around them, and that havoc can practically destroy anything as related to a country. And it's up to we, the people, to realize the dangers of beta males and how they create a man crisis, which puts a nation in crisis. So I'm going to get ready to wrap up tonight's stream, and I'm asking everybody to pick up a copy of ISIS Legacy and Eastine Horror of the Hyena Woman on Amazon.com. You can pick up ISIS Legacy in paperback and Kindle format. You can also pick up Eastine Horror of the Hyena Woman in your Kindle. Pre-order it right now. Both books are going to be, ISIS Legacy is available now. Eastine Horror of the Hyena Woman is available in May. And John Haynes at Death's Door will be available soon. So I'm asking everybody to pick up some books on Amazon, because I want to work hard. I want to get some weekend book sales. So I'm asking everybody to head over to Amazon.com. And I'm asking everybody to hit up the Cash App and help me stay on the air. So I want to thank everybody for coming out to tonight's stream, and I hope you'll be there for next week's stream.